duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents, and welcome to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com. I'm also your host for this episode. Guys, I've got a really awesome guest for us today. Marc Ford, former lead guitarist of the Black Crowes, and he's now a solo musician that's got some great albums out, particularly his Holy Ghost album. And you can go check that out while I'm talking. Head over to wolfandiron.com/005 if you want to find out more about what he's up to these days. I wanted to do a bit of a different introduction because I wanted to talk about how I came to learn about Marc Ford specifically, apart from the Black Crowes, and what made me want to bring him on this show. This is going to be kind of a longer episode because we had a pretty long conversation, but I want you guys to get all of it. I didn't want to do any cuts of anything that you guys might enjoy from here. So when I got out of the Navy in '98, I really wanted to get back into music, and I wanted to pick up where I left off. And of course, one of my favorite bands was the Black Crowes. And I noticed that I wasn't hearing as much of their music on the radio around 98, 99 time frame. And so I began to kind of look into where they were at, what had happened. And I went on a stray forum, and someone just mentioned, they said the Black Crowes haven't been the same since Marc Ford. And that was it. And I actually thought from that comment that Marc Ford was dead. This is how terrible internet rumors start. And so I thought, well, you know, the Black Crowes must be done. Marc Ford must be done. It'll never be the same. And that's kind of where I left it. Well, a few years go by, actually several years go by, and my wife we get World Magazine, and she's reading an article from it. And in there it talks about Marc Ford, former lead guitarist of the Black Crowes, and how he's had some sort of conversion, you could say, to Christianity, to something. But they were talking about his new album, Holy Ghost, which is just fantastic. I can't do it justice by talking about it here. Go listen to it immediately, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Even if you've listened to some of his other stuff, even if you listen to the Black Crowes music and you didn't like that, there's just something really unique about this album. So since that time, I started reading up on Marc Ford. One, I was excited to see that he was not, in fact, dead, that he was alive. And I was also eager to hear more about his story. So I went out and started doing a little bit of research on him. And not too long after I began Wolf and Iron, he was one of the guys on my list that I just wanted to reach out to and pick his brain. I wanted to find out how he went from being, you know, a rock star, which was one of my dreams, to, you know, kind of cutting away from that life, to finding God, and, you know, and then back on the road again, and doing that, and what that whole process looked like. And when I started the podcast, he was one of the first people that I wanted to have on here. And in fact, I think he was the second guy that I interviewed. And I'm not going to lie, I was extremely nervous when I was doing this. I mean, I think I was probably checking to make sure my mic was on, making sure that everything was still working like it was supposed to every 5 minutes, because I was really both excited, but I'm actually talking to one of my teenage heroes here, rock stars, and but also somebody that I knew I could learn a lot from, and I knew you guys would also get a lot from. So without further ado, here's Marc Ford. Mr. Marc Ford, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Sure, thank you.
Well, I'm a fan of yours, and I know a lot of people are as well. People have been following you over the years, going through the Black Crowes, your own albums, and a lot of people are probably certainly fans of your music. I think people are familiar with a lot of your music, but may not be as familiar with you. And so if you can, just kind of open up and let us hear a little bit about where you come from, what your family life was like, and kind of what you're doing now.
I was born in Long Beach, and grew up kind of with grandparents in the beginning, and then stepfather 5 or 6, and moved to a place called Cerritos, California, and basically grew up in the exciting world of the suburbs, and just out of a sort of general unhappiness, I wouldn't say all the time, but maybe unsatisfied, maybe. I think I was, for the most part, happy. First led me to have interest in music and the guitar, and then secondly, was kind of the fuel to get out,
Right. Yeah.
out of the neighborhood.
So you're you're in California now still, right? You come back?
Yeah. I've always been here.
Okay.
Yeah. I just keep moving further south.
Right.
So, I ended up sort of finishing high school early, and because clubbing was getting in the way. So I, just played as often as I could with as many people as I could for quite a while, and got to sit down with my banker stepfather, and got explained to me that 1 in 10,000 are gonna ever make it, and
Sure.
but I knew that I just said, but I'm the one.
Right.
I'm going to do this. There's no other alternative. This is what's happening, and so they really couldn't argue with that much.
Yeah.
And so that was basically it. Push towards that goal at pretty much any cost. I mean, it's all that really mattered to me at that point. In music was, it was my connection to something greater than what was visibly around.
Sure.
And so got a record deal with my band Burning Tree, and went on tour, and eventually met Chris Robinson and the guys in the Black Crowes, because a friend of mine who had a job in this very cool record shop turned me on to a promo copy of the record, and mine was either just out or just about to come out. And so, I just, as soon as I heard his voice, I said to my wife, I said, listen, that guy, he sings like I play guitar.
Wow.
And I said, I'm going to play with that guy someday. And then it wasn't soon after that that we met and became friends. And, then my band, at the time there was not many rock and roll bands kind of playing. It was all very much Sunset Strip, hair metal kind of
Right.
atmosphere. So there was some of us trying to get past that, but because of the industry and who knows what's going to happen, it was finally the Black Crowes that sort of busted through it and left the door open for all these other bands to kind of come up. But when they did that, Burning Tree had kind of run its course in a way, and the label had spent money, and they weren't sure. They loved us, but they didn't know what to do with us, and so I got off the label, and then got asked to join with them, and then then it was the launch.
Yeah.
On the rocket ship, just immediately, because they had just come off the tour of 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, and beginning to do arenas and opening for, Aerosmith and things. And I think it sold maybe 5 million records at that point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just stepping into that, making a second record was it felt exactly natural and right for me. But it was, really exciting, and here it is. All right, on my way.
Yeah. So I want to jump back for a second, because I want to talk about your Black Crowes experience. But you mentioned something that was that I'm familiar with too, and I think a lot of teenage guys get this, is that you knew you were going to be the one that was going to make it big. You were going to, beat all the odds. And you're right, you did. But did you believe that because you had some sort of skill that you knew was, beyond other people's, or was it just sort of this, arrogance of teenage years? What was it that kind of made you say, I'm going to be the guy?
Oh, I think both. I mean, I knew intimately that it was a gift to me, and I got pretty good at it pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. I spent every spare minute with it, and logged quite a few hours before I probably ever played it in public.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, not even really for the family very much, because it was mine, and it was a world I could go to with my door shut that was completely mine.
Yeah.
So, and being young and maybe quite as humble as you become later on.
Sure.
And just knowing that I had a destiny like that, and I had nothing to lose, and like, why not go for the thing that gives you most life?
Yeah.
You can always go lower.
Right.
So anyway, it was, but the thought of never having tried was worse than anything else.
So when you got in, with the Black Crowes, I mean, like you said, it was a rocket ship. You guys immediately took off. You didn't play for like 15 years, on the circuit, hoping that one day somebody will pick you up. You guys just went right to the top. What was that like? I mean, you said making the album was, the second album was really natural. What was it like to just step into that world of fame and all of that so quickly?
It was intense. I mean, it was like literally, stepping onto going from a 747 and then stepping onto a space shuttle. I mean, it was just that much more intense and that much more fun and crazy, and it was like going from Pony League to the NFL in a day.
Yeah.
But I think that was exactly where I needed to be at the time, because I'd sort of outgrown the music scene that I was in. Musically, I was ready for some more.
Yeah.
You play around. In LA, you could only really play once a month, really, because every show had to be that showcase that launched your career, because the music business was there. So there wasn't like a real community. Well, I guess there was, but we didn't get to play as much, like I found later in other cities, where there's a whole lot more sort of incestual band happenings.
Yeah.
Everyone's playing for each other, and you play several nights a week, but it was a different sort of thing here. And of course, I lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine.
Oh, okay. So, getting with them, they had just come off 18 months of touring. So they were together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they had done it on a bigger level than local clubs. And so they knew what they were doing. And I still had to learn that, because there is a whole other learning process for playing big stages and learning how to use, the monitor system and just, there's a lot of stuff, and just the space on stage, and
yeah,
there's a lot of things to learn. But playing wise, it was perfect, because they were on it, and I wasn't ready,
Yeah.
So we did that record pretty quick, and it's like 8 days, I think.
Jeez, that's awesome. I mean, when it clicks though, and things come together.
Yeah, it was really a natural sort of chemistry. which you hopefully get once in your life, and I've been lucky to have it a couple of times.
Yeah. So the Crows and your music, with them, really kind of harkened back to this, and also went forward to sort of this bluesy rock thing, right? Like you said, when everybody else was still doing hair bands and that kind of stuff. What was the inspiration for you that pushed you in that direction versus, something different?
I don't know. It's just the music that I liked. There was the Sgt. Pepper and the CCR
Mm-hmm.
records in the house, and then just the kids, like the derelicts I were hanging out with, were all they were very into metal.
Yeah.
At the time, and some of it was all right, and some of it just wasn't. And to me, that was all I'd really been exposed to that was happening in anything that I liked,
right,
that I'd heard on the radio or anything. But,
yeah.
And then someone played me Band of Gypsies, and it just ripped the roof off. And I was like, wait a minute, I didn't know that was allowed. You know what I mean? Like, what is that? And so it changed everything. And so I just pursued that era of music, and you study about things and the history of things, and you keep peeling back and going further and further to find the roots of what you're into. Basically, it's a sort of life study.
Yeah.
So I mean, we were just emulating the people we liked.
Yeah. But then kind of adding your own flavor to it as well, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a different time.
Yeah.
And unless you're going to be a novelty act,
right,
you can't help but kind of bring it to at least the present, if not the future.
Yeah. I was really into music, really since I was a little kid. I think it was, I remember being in my mom's car and Led Zeppelin would come on, and I just got this weird feeling in my stomach, like, this stuff is awesome,
Mm.
And I would look at my mom and I would try to judge other people's feelings on whether or not they were into it the same way that I was, and if it was natural for me to like it as much as I did. And I kind of quickly got the idea that, no, I actually enjoy this more than maybe most people do. And so when I was a teenager, I was 13, 14 years old, I started getting into guitar. Your guys' music eventually came out, along with Guns N' Roses and everybody else that was happening in the day. And it's really transformational, to hear you guys and your style with the Black Crowes, because like you said, there were a lot of guys that were just doing metal stuff, and there wasn't really a melody behind it, and there wasn't this poetic sense, behind it. And finding guys that would want to play in a band together, that actually wanted to do things that were, I think, a notch above, just screaming and, angst, and actually putting something together that has a meaning and that's deep, and that actually requires some thought. It was a challenge to try to find people like that. So
yeah. Well, it was obviously for me too. But the thing about, I think maybe it has something to do with the South, probably.
Sure. Very
much so.
Yeah.
And the fact that Chris and Rich's father had a really fantastic record collection, so they grew up, with like the best of all the genres.
Yeah.
He really. So Otis Redding was in the house compared to, who knows what else somebody in the suburb of LA or something was going to get.
Yeah.
So it was a deeper understanding of music. So I was very fortunate to sort of get to be around that for several years.
I want to fast forward a bit in your story, and I want to do that by actually sharing a story of my own. There's an event that happened in my life that I think about almost every time I play your record, every time I listen to Holy Ghost. And I was, like I said, when I was a teenager, I was really big into music. I think it's probably the closest thing to an addiction that I ever had, And my goal was to get out of high school, go rock the free world, and not look back. That didn't really happen. I actually got married, went to the military, and had a very normal life. And when I got out of the military, I ended up here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was in a music store called Mars at the time. My wife was actually with me, which was unusual, but I was there trying to kind of revive the dream of getting back into music and things. And in walks a friend of mine from Jackson, Tennessee, from my high school, and haven't seen him in years. His name is Josh Brown. He was the lead singer of the band Full Devil Jacket, he comes in with his band. He's got the leather on. He's got the silver chains, the long hair, the mascara, and all that stuff. And they're kind of getting ready for a show that night. And I'm just as shocked as he is that, of all places, here in a music store in Charlotte, North Carolina, we bump into each other. Mm-hmm. And we got to talking. We went to one of the back rooms where you can test out the guitars and stuff like that. And we're sitting down just kind of catching up over the last couple of years. And I started to feel like such a loser. I was telling him, I was like, man, look, I just pretty much blew my opportunity. Here I am now. I'm married, which is great. But at the same time, I feel like, my chances for getting involved in music are really just gone. And I went on for a bit. And Josh is always so kind, and to me, he's living the life. He's kind of living the dream that I had. And he said, man, you don't know what it's like out here. He said that the pressure for drugs and for alcohol and for sex is just overwhelming on the road. And he said that, there most nights I think and I wish that I could just come home to my family, hang out with my kids, have a regular 8 to 5. And there's something about your story that I'm still trying to put together that always kind of leads me to think back to you and that time as well. And that because I know you stepped away from music for a while, and then you kind of came back to it. So tell us kind of like what happened that made you say, hey, I've got to step out of the scene for a bit and before coming back into it.
Well, basically, it just wasn't working for me anymore. It wasn't. I got to the end of a very busy period where we had the reunion tour, and I had a solo record, and I found it's when I met Ryan Bingham and did his records and a few other things, and I had just, I think, burnt myself out, and home life wasn't great. And we'd been divorced and remarried and broke. It's a hilarious story. So we'd worked on things in various times, and it was just time to just shut it down and sort of get it together at home, because it wasn't going to be there for very long if I didn't.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of unplugged from it. It didn't seem to really matter much to me anymore. So it, shooting forward, what happened was, I couldn't even listen to music for a while. I just didn't want to have any part of it. And then just recently, really, I did play a little bit, but it wasn't really very inspiring. I wasn't finding any sort of gumption to go and do what it takes to get momentum moving,
Yeah.
to be able to go play music, and until just recently. But in that period, I had a daughter, and she's just turned 7, and a 15-year-old at home, and 27-year-old is off doing it in Austin.
Yeah.
Music and fronting a band and all that stuff. So, and me and my wife, just working on gaining trust and solidifying the relationship, so that, if I was to choose to go do it again, then it would be you have to have home life together, or you're out there kind of in a dangerous zone on the road.
Yeah. So what's it been like then to kind of go back into music? You said that, recently you've been drawn back into it. Is it a different kind of drawing than it was when you were younger, or is it kind of the same? What does that feel like?
No, it doesn't seem as desperate as it did when I was young, and I think that, as a young man, you're trying to build your kingdom. You're trying to find out who you are and, how much do you matter, and you're right, mostly, and, I think it's sort of built into us that we're full of testosterone and we go out and we conquer the world and you maintain it,
yeah.
I guess. And I guess basically the difference is that my identity isn't tied into it.
Wow. Yeah.
I think we got to be careful, all of us, that what we do isn't who we are.
Yeah.
And when it switched from I'm a guitar player to I'm a guy that plays guitar, it changed everything. And coming off of that, touring the world and on a really high scale to rehab and then coming out and playing in some tiny little club, I had to have a moment once where it's like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I realized it's because I love it.
Yeah.
And I play when no one's looking, so who cares how many people are around, and I got to the point where I literally could take it or leave it. I was thinking about getting into something else and going to school, and
wow,
it was just a real freeing, epiphany sort of for me that this isn't who I am, because prior to that, if I had a good gig, I was a pretty awesome guy, and if I didn't, I wasn't,
Right.
So it's brutal on your identity, and until that's sorted out,
Yeah.
it's perilous.
And I think a lot of guys go through that. It doesn't matter if you're in the music industry or not,
No,
It's just, are you your work, or is just work something that you do and you're more than that,
Yeah. It's tough when you do really truly love what you're doing. It's hard to separate,
Yeah.
For me anyway, it's hard to just go, that's also my job.
Yeah.
Well,
You put your name on it, in a sense, You're kind of signing yourself to it and saying, this is a part of me. And, here I am, world. I'm putting a piece of me out here for you to make judgments on. And it is difficult, I think, to separate yourself from that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's even a bigger reason not to have who you are tied into that. Especially if people are judging you every day.
Sure.
On your performance and other things. And so to have your identity tied to that, to somebody's opinion that if you respect, or maybe is sort of in the path that you're going, or anything like that, and they're judging what you're doing, and you're hearing they're judging who I am.
Yeah.
And yeah,
it's interesting though. When I listen to Holy Ghost and I think about kind of what you just said, about kind of not associating your identity with the music necessarily. I think in some ways, Holy Ghost you've produced a lot of rockin' music over the years. There's no doubt about that. But there's something that's more tender and more moving, more touching about Holy Ghost than I think any of the other stuff you've done. I'm just wondering what the tie-in is there with that album and the move you made that we just talked about.
I was busted.
Yeah.
When the songs were written, most of them.
Yeah.
Financially, emotionally, spiritually, just, and I realized I really had to shed the old to start anew, because, I'd obviously done some things that I wasn't proud of, and I really honestly had to get honest with myself and go, well, you know, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
You know, this is obviously not working. I've got to do something different. So it was just confessional sort of stuff and coming clean and saying stuff out in the open. So you're sort of accountable to it after that, you know, and,
Right.
and I knew it was a batch of songs that had to go together. And also I just waited for the timing. You know, the timing just wasn't right until it was right. And then, so, yeah.
I want to ask a question kind of related to something that's been on my mind for a while. Whenever I listen to your story, there's something I can't quite pinpoint, and maybe you can help me. If I listen to Holy Ghost or I listen to some of the old Crows music, and there's always this sort of floating theme about religion or God kind of, you know, overshadowing things or kind of weave throughout the music. Sometimes it's in the lyrics, sometimes it's in a song title, what have you. And I'm just wondering, like, you know, did God and some kind of spirituality play into, you know, you coming out of, you know, the kind of the darkness, I guess, and then getting back into, you know, the light of music and your family?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think musicians or artists tend to have that extra sense about supernatural or, you know, otherworldly, or, you know, something else is going on besides, you know, what's tangible, you know. And,
sure.
And so, and I've had some pretty bizarre experiences in my life, and always in my life, that were kind of unexplainable. And of course, then you start to feel crazy because everyone else is going like, "What? Shut up! That's not happening." And
right.
Anyway, yeah. So I mean, just to cut it short, I was in the hospital, and one night I got woken up to incredible sound and sight, and I roll over, and there's Jesus standing at the bottom of the foot of my bed, you know, all psychedelic and incredible. And for the first moment in a very long time, I was pain-free and totally at peace. And, you know, I just said, "What are you doing there?" And he says, are you done? And I said, "Yes." He goes, "All right, it's time." And I said, "Okay." And I just rolled over and went to sleep. You know?
Yeah.
And I didn't really think a whole lot about it for a long time until I started telling people about it years later. And you know, my wife at the time had already been trying to get me to go to church, and I would go and go, you know, those are nice stories, but I don't see people acting any different.
Right.
Or not a whole lot different. It's just maybe a little more covert. They got a nicer face on the outside, but they're still, you know, the hypocrisy of it. And,
sure.
And I just said, I know God, and I don't think he's in this building. You know?
Yeah.
And sure enough, down the line, it was kind of a dead, spiritless place.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't want that, you know. So anyway, over the years, I got to know him a lot better, and it's a humbling experience. So yeah, absolutely went into all of it.
Well, I'll tell you that I've had an experience similar to yours. My wife and I both actually had the same experience, so I guess it's how I know it's confirmed. I won't go into all the details about it because we don't have time, but you know, people kind of wonder sometimes, like, if you saw Jesus, why did you just roll over and go back to sleep and not really worry about it? Well, I can tell you that in our experience, if I were to describe it and talk about what I saw, it would be freaky. But when you actually experience it, it becomes very real, and it's almost like, oh yeah, that's always been that way, you know. That's when that's what it surprised me when the words came out, like, "What are you doing here?" Yeah. You know, like, "Oh, I didn't expect to see you till I got out of here." You know what I mean? Yeah, and
it was just so natural. You know?
Exactly, and I think that there's something to me that's, there's truth in it. If you read any kind of story about most supernatural stuff, there's sort of a mysticism or a craziness about it. But for people who actually experience it, it actually is kind of just, oh yeah, this is how things really are.
Yeah.
So that's really cool that you had that, and thanks for sharing that story.
And also, that wasn't the first time something strange had happened to me. I had seen stuff before, and most of it wasn't good.
Yeah.
Probably because of where I was at and the people I was surrounded by 24 hours. It's a lifestyle, there wasn't a whole lot of grace out there.
Right.
So anyway, it wasn't, in all my life so it was just kind of an extension of, oh yeah, of course. That's why I said to my wife, I don't think God's in this building, because I'd experienced him before. I just didn't know what to call him.
Yeah. That's awesome. So your boy's out. He's touring. He's doing he's fronting a band. Did you have any kind of particular advice, that's different than the normal kind of father-son stuff, where you're like, hey man, I've been here before. Here's the things to look out for. Because he's kind of following in your footsteps with that.
Yeah. He grew up with it, and he knows. He's very aware of what not to do.
Yeah.
I showed him a lot of those things, and he loves it, and that's his passion, and it was very strange. His life sort of paralleled mine in a lot of ways, where at the same time in school he just got completely bored and disinterested, and that was coincided with when I was going to go do the reunion tour in Mill 5 with the Crows, and he got kicked out of school at the time, or suspended or expelled, I don't remember, but
yeah. I
said, look, take the test to prove that they've taught you everything that you need to know in high school and get your diploma. Same thing I did.
Mm-hmm.
I go in, and then come with me, because a teenager out of school and bored does not make for good decisions.
No.
So I was leaving for 6 weeks to go do rehearsals and warm-up gigs, and then the big sort of here we are, we're back thing. And so maybe it was more than that, 2 months or something, but we lived in New York together in a hotel room for 6 weeks and traveled around a bit, and
wow.
He got to witness the whole thing from day one rehearsal to the end thing, and just the time he and I together. And somebody said to me, "Man, what I wouldn't give to spend 6 weeks with my dad anywhere."
Yeah.
So he really got an education, and he told me later that his life in his home, he got taught that dreams do come true.
Yeah.
That to go for it, So that was great. And then when I went on tour, my next solo record, I just said, he had outgrown his peers and was bored again. Mm-hmm. And I just said, well, I lied and said, I'm going to hire another guitar player to go with me. It might as well be you,
Right.
And I'm not hiring you because you're my son. I'm hiring you because you're capable and you can do this. I can't treat you any different. You'll get paid the same as other people. I expect you to.
Sure.
So he went on tour for the year with me, and so he got a pretty decent education on it and learned to love every bit of it while he was out, doing it. And so he's doing it for himself now.
Yeah. That's awesome. It really is.
Yeah. It's great. I mean, making music and doing anything with your family is pretty cool, and making music together is really special.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, I got two last questions for you. One, when you just want to play music, you just want to kind of work on a song or whatever. Is there a guitar that you gravitate towards and you always pick it up?
Yeah. Some sort of Fender, either a Strat or a Tele.
Yeah.
I started out on Fenders, and they just always feel like home to me. You know, I can play Gibsons for a while, and then pick up a Fender, and go, oh yeah, this is what a guitar really feels like.
That's awesome. And the last question is, you know, you've really lived quite the life, and you've shared a lot of yourself and a lot of your music with the world. What does that mean to you, kind of looking back on that? And, you know, you still got the road ahead, kind of in your heart of hearts to have done that and to have really put that out there.
Well, I mean, it was incredibly intense, and I think so much so that, you know, since then, memory would, like, I'd get reminded of something, and even stuff I don't remember. I mean, I went through it, so the muscle memory is there in a way.
Yeah.
And it was just a very, very high level of performance, and there's something you learn in that about, you know, focus and just it was. That's another thing that's a little bit hard once you've played at that level,
yeah,
or worked at that level. With anything less than that seems to be a little bit unchallenging or unsatisfying. You know,
yeah.
Like you can't spar with anybody. You know,
Yeah.
And that's how you always get better, is playing with people at least as good as you are. You know, or working with them in any kind of situation. You know, great people pull you up. You know?
Yeah.
And now it's just, I'm really, really, you know, selling all those records and playing to that many people was cool. But getting a letter from somebody on Facebook telling them how something I had done affected them in a profound way in their life really is, that's like, well, there it is. That's why you do this. You know,
Yeah.
Hopefully something that you've been a part of affects somebody else's life in a positive way. You know?
Yeah.
So I just want to, you know, feed my family and make music. Really is kind of my goal, and keep doing it.
Yeah.
You know. So.
Well, you're making some incredible music, and I look forward to hearing more from you.
Yeah, I just finished a record, by the way.
Did you really?
Yeah.
What's it called?
I'm not really sure yet. I Deep Water, it might be called.
Yeah.
It was it's a great record. It's, you know, like I was saying, if Holy Ghost is Sunday morning, then this is a little more Saturday night.
Yeah.
It's fun, and it's a great band, and that'll be out in a few months.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing it.
Thanks.
And I really do appreciate this conversation, Mark. It's been awesome.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there we have it, guys. Marc Ford. Really unique experience to be able to hear from his life. Somebody who's really lived something that many of us can only imagine. And a lot of people really shoot for that fame and want that fame and don't realize the kind of challenges that come with it. So I appreciate his time. One of the things that Mark said to me after we got done with recording the podcast was, we were talking back and forth on what it's like to just be men, raise our families, have older sons. And he said one of the most difficult things sometimes is just being present. And that's really stuck with me. And actually that theme has come up over the last few weeks. And so I think it's something that we all need to think about, being present with our families and being there in the moment, being conscientious of our role with those that we love, especially our kids. All right, guys, go check out Holy Ghost when you can. Give it a listen. It's a fantastic album. I look forward to hearing Mark's next one. Until next time, I'm Mike Yarbrough, reminding you to keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.